I'm Dr. Jessica McCarthy, and I'm wondering if this applies to you. So throughout my academic career, from elementary school through high school, I was an overachiever. I got straight A's. I didn't have to work that hard. High school was my first challenge with honors and AP courses. The A's slipped to B's, and I even got my first C+. But it was in science. I wasn't that good at it, or so I was told. I got into a great college. I had a scholarship to Lehigh University, and I thought it was going to be more of the same. Little did I know how wrong I was going to be. After my first semester of college, my GPA was a 1.67. Now I know what you're thinking. You're gonna think that I was partying and drinking a lot. And you would absolutely be correct. With that being said, part of that was to cope with the fact that I had no idea what I was doing in college. And part of it was for fun because, I like to have fun, and that's what I did when I was in college. But I had no idea how to study. I had no idea what executive function was. I had no idea how to manage my time. I had no idea what task motivation looked like, what task initiation, how to start a task. I just knew that I didn't do my work. I waited till the last minute when I was motivated, and I often failed. I failed so hard, in fact, that I had an F in US foreign policy, and I started off as I don't even remember what my major was, something in that regard. And I also got a D- in intro to psych. Obviously I took it over, and I have had a successful career in psychology since, but what I didn't know at the time was that I had ADHD. And if I look back to my childhood, my room was always a mess. My folder for school was always a mess. My desk was a mess. My backpack, my locker. My mom kept me on task. Assignments were done at the last minute, and I did well on them, so there was no motivation to fix or learn anything different because the outcome was the grades. I wasn't a behavior problem in school. I had way too much anxiety to cause a problem, and I always figured it out. And we hear that a lot, especially with girls and young women and even older women with ADHD. We figure it out. We're really, really good at figuring that out, right? But you don't have to. It wasn't until I was doing my doctoral studies and the director of our program said, you need to get your butt back into therapy, because I was having a hard time finishing reports and longer papers on time. And that was the first time my therapist said to me, Jessica, do you think you could have ADHD? And my response was like, no, there's no way I could have ADHD, because ADHD is a diagnosis for troublemakers. ADHD is a diagnosis for boys. ADHD is a diagnosis for kids who have behavior problems. At no point did it occur to me that that could be my diagnosis until that moment. And even in the years to follow, I started to put the pieces together. I had a very hard time with starting tasks in advance. I had a very hard time with motivating myself to stay on task. I had a very hard time pacing myself with tasks. I had, and I still have, a hard time with kind of keeping my spaces neat and organized. I get incredibly overwhelmed, and sometimes I struggle with either knowing where to start, or even once I do, with starting in general. I get very easily distracted until the 11th hour, when all of a sudden the dopamine hits, and now I'm locked and loaded and I can get done what I need to get done. Why is this important? Women, girls are diagnosed a little bit later than boys with ADHD. Girls don't tend to get diagnosed, best case scenario, until around middle school, because they aren't behavior problems. They don't come up on the radar of teachers because they're quiet, they keep to themselves, and again, they figure out how to get it done. Oftentimes, we see girls in high school, college, or even grown-ass adults come to our practice and say, I think there's a problem, or even better yet, we see women that are entering perimenopause thinking that they're anxious, their children are leaving home, they're having a midlife crisis, when the reality of it is that when you dig a little bit further back into their history, they've most likely had ADHD, they've had anxiety on top of it. Anxiety was the diagnosis given because that was what is seen, but the fact of the matter is that they had an attention deficit issue that made executive function, planning, reasoning, organizing, problem solving, staying on task nearly impossible unless there was a stressor of time and these additional pressures put on that helped them to function. But that is absolutely no way to live.